guys, my name is Dr. Sharnael Wolverton-Sehan. I'm so excited to introduce to you my new and latest book, The Science of Miracles, Remembering the Frequency of Love. This is your time to shift any kind of negative things that have been in your life that no longer serve you into something beautiful, miraculous, abundant, thriving health, business, partnership, whatever the situation. This is your time. Get the book, apply the principles, and watch the miracles happen for you. All right, guys. All right, my name is Dr. Sharnael Wolverton-Sehan. I'm super excited to be with you guys today on a really fun subject, a little bit serious, but I think it is going to put some pieces and connect some dots and kind of see the bigger picture of what's going on right now. Anyway, a few announcements before we get going into that. Please go to swiftfire.org, check out the newsletter, jump into the resources page, go to the shop. There's lots of great resources there, whether it's books, apps, just reading material. You can definitely subscribe to the YouTube as well, because then you're going to get all the notifications of all the great speakers that we have coming in that we're doing some great interviews on. Craig, welcome back. We are co-hosting today, and we do this every Thursday at noon. And we have a really brilliant guest here, a new guest, actually, Julie, who you guys haven't met each other. So let me introduce you to.
Nice to meet you, Julie.
Nice to meet you. Yeah.
Awesome. And we're actually going to be talking about her book, Beneath Sheep's Clothing, which if you can hold it up, Julie, just so people can see it. The discussion has to do with the communist takeover of our culture, the way things are going right now. And I've known Julie, what, a decade, longer-ish?
Something like that.
Yeah, so she's a practitioner with aromatherapy, and I'm a naturopath and do obviously love aromatherapy. And we kind of met learning about health, physical health. But she contacted me about this book that she wrote, and I don't know how or why, but the message was hidden in a spam folder, and I didn't get it. And then one day we were talking about astrology and how everything affects the ether, and I noticed that she did some missionary work in Russia, which I don't know how I missed that, knowing you. But with everything that's going on in the world, specifically regarding Russia and the situation, I just thought, well, wow, this is a great opportunity to bring her in to, kind of give some boots on the ground of what she's experienced, what she's seen, where we are today, how that works together, and then talk about this book that, oh my gosh, it's full packed of information that kind of, for me, helps me understand how to navigate through some of this stuff right now. So without further ado, Julie, if you could just give us a little clip notes of screenshot of your background and kind of what is the birthing of this book. And then we can go into some more things that are specific to now and how that relates to the book.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the late 90s, I went to Russia as a missionary for a year and a half and learned the language, lived, in apartments and talked to probably 1,000 people, maybe more, asking them, about, did they believe in God? And I was really surprised that out of everyone I talked to, I only met one atheist. I was really expecting to meet a lot more atheists because it was only a few years after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And I found there was a real upswing in belief when I was there. And I actually also encountered some people with really, really deep roots in faith, that it was apparent that they and their families had continued their faiths throughout the 70 years of Soviet rule. And that really fascinated me. I came back from my mission and I started graduate school at Florida State, and I studied Russian and East European studies and Russian language and literature. And I had the opportunity to write a master's thesis, and I decided to write it on underground Christian movements in the Soviet Union and their survival tactics and the tactics of the Soviet government to destroy them. So
I was just gonna say, I was being facetious, like, oh, totally easy subject, just like, let's just talk about that.
Yeah, it took 2 years to write the thesis, and I was really blessed I was able to do a study abroad at Moscow State University and do some research there in Russia, including meeting some people who were current members of underground Christian faiths and people who were members of churches that had once been underground during the Soviet rule. And just things started coming together. And I can't say it was completely an uplifting experience because I had to read lots of horrible accounts. In fact, one semester in grad school, I took Soviet history the same semester that I took dissident literature of the Soviet Union. And I think I cried every day that whole semester because I already had fallen in love with the people of Russia because I'd already lived there as a missionary. And so to learn more about the history and how deeply traumatized the people were because of their government, yeah, it was difficult, but I definitely don't regret it. And I basically, with my thesis, found the three major tactics that the Soviet government used to destroy religion or to try to destroy religion. And then in 2008, I began seeing the same trends happening in America. So that was the genesis of my book. I always felt, even when I was working on my thesis, that this information I was working on was going to be put to use in some way. It wasn't just a master's thesis. I didn't know exactly how that would happen, but I actually wrote most of my book in 2010, 2011. I took time off from my businesses and then I wasn't quite able to finish it. It just seemed like something was missing. And what was missing was 10 years of insane communist incursion in our schools that's now so blatant that hopefully people can see what's happening. So I decided I pulled my book out of my hard drive and began to finish it about a year ago, and I published it at the very end of March of this year. So.
Wow. So I'd love to know. You said there was three major sort of pillars of the sort of communist move into. Did you say into schools?
Well, anti-religious. There are three main anti-religious tactics.
Yes, sorry. Go on. What were they? Sorry.
Yeah. Yes. Number one is anti-religious propaganda coupled with pro-communist propaganda, and this is where the schools come in quite heavily. Right. Schools and media, entertainment, everything. Mm-hmm. Number two is heavy persecution of the religious fringes. So when the Soviet Union first, like after the Russian Revolution, and they started consolidating power, initially in the very early years of the Soviet Union, they went after all Christians. They executed, imprisoned, millions of Christians and pastors and priests especially. Destroyed church buildings, destroyed, Bibles and things like that. And what they found by World War II, they found that their tactics were backfiring, that there was a lot of underground faith that it was actually growing. They were not able to completely destroy religion. So they switched their tactics after World War II. And they began that really heavy persecution only on certain groups. And this were certain groups that were considered illegal. And I'll go more into that in a second. The third tactic is infiltration of the legal churches, where the KGB, literally KGB agents sent into the seminaries and then sent into the Orthodox Church, for example, and other churches too, to lead those churches so the government could steer the church and control everything from within the churches. The churches that were not able to be infiltrated, and again, we had underground Baptists, underground Pentecostals, underground Seventh-day Adventists, and also Jehovah's Witnesses were the four groups that I looked at the most. Those were the ones that resisted those things. They were the ones that still were heavily arrested, executed, not executed so much, but imprisoned in the Gulag, and many of them died in the Gulag as a result of the horrific conditions there. raids on their meetings, kids taken from them and put in foster care to be raised by the government, really actually to put in state-run orphanages where they would try to reprogram the kids. It was considered damaging that for Christians to teach their kids, that was considered child abuse. So the kids had to be taken away from their parents for their own protection, supposedly. So yeah, I began seeing all that happening in America, and it was, the more I looked, the worse the picture got. So I knew I had to write this book.
Mm-hmm.
So
one thing that I want to say, I mean, because Craig and I, we come from a religious background, but we're definitely not religious. And I can understand why there'd be something trying to infiltrate to keep people from maybe the programming. But Christ consciousness is a whole different thing, love, truth, and what have you. And what's interesting is when we've done scalar waves on Putin, for example, he has amazing numbers.
really?
Yeah. And so it's kind of confusing when you see, Jesus at 1,000 and love at 500 and Putin's at 450. And so is another person that used to be our president that some people still think is the president, and their numbers are the same. It's so I think it goes a little bit deeper as far as not necessarily the head of the guy who's the thing. And Craig can attest to this too, just because I don't know how much you want to go into it, Craig, with the whole Ukraine thing and your family members.
Mm-hmm.
But, there was all these people who wanted to flee the Ukraine because of the horrific situation that was there. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, when the Russian president steps in and says whatever, and then this war is going on. Not that there isn't a war, there really is. It's confusing when I look at the numbers and say, like, well, what's really going on? Who's really driving this ship? What's really him and what isn't him? What can he not even control? What can he control? Because we all know when we had our other president, there were things going on in the United States that was nothing having to do with our president at the time. They were just kind of like, had to go along with whatever Congress or the House of Representatives was doing, because of that balance that they put in to make sure that one person can't dictate, right? Mm-hmm. And so as much headway as we made during that 4 years, there was also a lot of things that were constantly kind of the undercurrent of, like, just the Russian, thing where they were saying he was collaborating with them or whatever, or just, all that mess that went on, and it's still going on, which is a whole different subject. But can you speak to, like, how much, how do you know where this is all coming from? Because when Craig's family left, then all of a sudden it was like they were upset with the new guy doing whatever instead of the actual government that was in place before. And I was like, don't you remember? And then at the same time, here we are now with the president that we have now, whatever that situation is, and we don't have any say or what have you, and what dumbass things they do. We're just along with the ride again, just like the Russians who are there with their situation. It's like they can't stop it. I have tons of Russian friends who are upset about the whole thing going on, and they're being blamed and outed and canceled. And, so many, they've taken corporations out of Russia and quit selling to Russia and all this stuff. And it's like the people suffer in the middle, and they don't have any say about anything. They can't do anything about it. Same with the Ukraine. So speak a little bit into that. I don't know if that's too hard of a topic, but
it's definitely not my area of expertise. But what I can say with certainty is that I do not trust our media portrayal of any of those events going on in Ukraine. I don't trust the media portrayal of Putin as the world's boogeyman. Mm-hmm. I do have a number of friends and acquaintances in Russia or from the former Soviet Union with family members from Ukraine, Russia. I mean, first of all, Russia and Ukraine are like brothers. They're like brother countries. Their peoples are very closely tied. Yeah, is Russia the older brother that historically has maybe dominated? Yes. Mm-hmm. But I believe this stoking of anger, this attempt to stoke anger between Ukrainians and Russians is manufactured. It looks very manufactured to me. There has been a little bit of animus there over the last couple of 100 years, where the Ukrainians, basically Ukraine was a country of peasants. And when the Soviet Union came along, that was the first industrialization. Ukraine had a little bit of a national consciousness before that, but not that much. They were both, they have amazing land, amazing earth. The fruits and vegetables that come out of Ukraine and southern Russia are amazingly loaded with nutrition, like unbelievably. And so those people were growing food in one of the most productive parts of the world. So they didn't have necessarily an idea that they wanted their own country. So this now thing where they have to be separate, it seems manufactured. I know there was a war going on since that coup that took place 14 years ago. There's been Ukrainian army has been shelling civilians in the Donbass region, ethnic Russians, and they killed like 14,000 civilians. Nobody ever reported on that. I saw a short documentary about it that just about tore my heart out. It was extremely graphic. I mean, it was showing bodies and horrific carnage. I really don't like this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. I do see that there are globalist forces that have hijacked Ukraine. And, you know, I do have Russian friends that believe Putin is in the right. And because I don't trust our media, I'm willing to consider that possibility. I don't think that Putin is necessarily perfect, but he has tried to do some good for his people. He has not, for instance, he has not wanted his people to be over-vaccinated. He has not wanted his people. He has, the standard of living in Russia now compared to what it was when I lived there is not even close. My Russian friends that back when I was there in the late 90s, people were making $30 a month on average. And of course, things cost less there. But now I have friends that I met in Russia back in the late 90s. They're able to travel internationally. They have money for that. They have nicer apartments. They have a much higher standard of living. And I do think that Putin has worked hard towards that. I'm not going to say that everything is perfect about him because, anyways, that's not my area of expertise. But that's my sense on that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously I hear horror stories of things that have gone on, having a Ukrainian family. It's married family, not blood. But what I'm really with your book, I'm really interested because I can see it, and I know many other people can see just how even in the past 20 years, there has been a concerted effort to influence the culture. I mean, Western civilization is that they are trying to collapse it. There's no question about it. And when I say they, I think are we all in agreement of who that is? It's this. There is a globalist deep state issue, and anybody that thinks that there's national wars that cut and dry anymore, it's just not true. There is things going on behind the scenes that we have no idea about, and we're dealing with these kind of corporate owners, oligarchs that basically own world governments. They are really pushing for a global government. They're really pushing it hard, and obviously, my opinion, and it is just that. So don't quote me on this. Is that Russia have been standing in the way of that?
Yeah.
And so obviously they've demonized them. Obviously, I think what's going on with Ukraine is horrific. I've seen some awful things. But I ask who's doing it. You know, my conspiratorial mind switches on. However, referring back to your book and how they're trying to bring in a global communist world order, they're not even quiet about it. They've said it over and over again. They want a one world government under a communist regime. And how, I mean, America. I mean, I'm in the UK, and you know, even over here, we see that America are really the last bastion of freedom and truth. And so, you know, these corrupt guys have spent billions and billions to try and infiltrate your nation. What are the main signs that you can see, that you point out in your book, that kind of show us what they've been doing, and how long has it been going on, as far as you can see?
Yeah, great question. So in the first part of my book, I go through each of those 3 Soviet anti-religious tactics, and I show how that happened in the Soviet Union. And then that's like the first 1/3 of the book. The last 2/3 is how this is happening in America and has been happening. So one of the things that was a big shocker to me when I learned this is that actually Lenin and the Bolshevik Revolution, guess who that was funded by?
I can guess, but go on.
It was funded by big monopolistic capitalists in America and some other big corporations and banks in Europe. And, it was a big investment to invest. Even if you take the political ideology out of it, here was an opportunity for them to help quickly industrialize the biggest country in the world and make money off of it. So even just with that, but then you look even further, and some of these monopolistic capitalists from America, who they basically took over every institution in America. They were able to buy out healthcare, the Federal Reserve, banking. They completely took over education in America, starting with the universities, and then the teachers' colleges, and then spreading down through K through 12. And the churches. And so some of these Gilded Age robber barons literally funded avowed communists. There's several examples. Well, let's just go to education. They had a whole group of people who went to China and went to the Soviet Union to study education and to figure out some things. And they came back with glowing reviews. One of them in particular, he's considered the father of American education, just John Dewey, and glowing reviews about the Soviet Union and implementing all these changes in our schools here in America. So I have, and actually in 2 chapters in my book, I go through the 10 steps to how do we go with our education system from an education system that promoted freedom and freedom of thought and entrepreneurship to what we have today, which is horrific, beyond words. And the first step was getting just a few people in charge of all of that. We don't have time to go into all of those details, but there was an effort to dumb down the people, the children of America, very deliberate, again, beginning over 100 years ago.
Right.
They stopped teaching phonics with reading. The reading, ability of Americans has suffered greatly, and many other things that they did use these different weird teaching theories that did not work, and they kept pushing forward with them. And then we get into more modern times. I mean, it's really hard to summarize all of this. Let me just read some of the 10 steps. Step 1, allow a few corrupt people to make decisions for the many, their education. I go through that. Step 2, replace God with secular humanism, replace morality with sexual permissiveness. That was one that was important. There were actually the cultural Marxists in Europe, the Marxists were expecting that the Western nations would just fall to communism, like they expected. And by the 30s, the 20s and 30s, when that wasn't happening, they were surprised. And what they did is they got together and they're like, okay, if we're going to spread into Western nations like America, UK, etc., first we have to destroy the cultural hegemony, which is keeping them so that they're not falling to communism.
Yeah.
So that's their faith in God. We got to tear that down.
Yeah.
Morality, we've got to tear that down, and any number of other things. So that's a big part of it. Step 3, replace patriotism with globalism. In the schools, they really had to tear down patriotism, and now we see how far that's gone.
Yeah, I mean, burning flags, and it's almost like bad if you're a patriot. But going back to the education, would you say Common Core math or what, all of that would be under that umbrella? That was so stupid.
Yeah, I don't appreciate Common Core math, and I do think that that at the top there are people that are very glad that that's confusing a lot of children.
And parents. I mean, because when they came home, for me anyway,
Yeah.
I would just do it the way I did it, and they'd say, well, we can't do it that way. And then the teachers would say, you have to do it our way. But they weren't explaining to us. I mean, if you have to explain it to an adult over and over and over and they still can't get it, I mean, I'm not a dumbass. Like, I know shit. So I have good numbers to understand things. And that wasn't understandable. Like, it made zero sense. But anyway, I could see how that would be confusing. But I'm just had to jump in on that. But keep going.
Right. Teach the basics poorly on purpose. That's part of Common Core math and the reading. And then we get into the literally explicit communist indoctrination and preparing children for the woke communist revolution. Then we have the more modern steps. Step 5, insert operant conditioning teaching methods and brainwashing computerized curricula. It's very, very far-reaching right now.
Mm-hmm.
The kids are just sitting at their computers and they get the little ding and they're just clicking and not really learning that much, but it's definitely conditioning them. And step 6, critical theories in the school promoting wokeness. So we have critical race theory, gender theory, queer theory. And then we've got our, and also hypersexualizing children in the schools with comprehensive sexuality education, which is shocking. This was first done by communists in Hungary. There was a communist takeover in like 1919 or something like that in Hungary. But it was, and the one guy was like, the fastest way to just destabilize Hungary, we're going to go into the schools and we're going to like totally hypersexualize the kids. But Hungary kicked that regime out. They were like, no, we're not doing that. Now they ended up having to deal with the Soviet Union later, but communists have used hypersexualizing children as a way to radicalize the populace because it separates children from their families and their religion and their traditions, and it makes them more susceptible to political radicalization.
Yeah, look exactly what's going on. I mean, this is something because I've got I'm a parent. I've got a 14-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old daughter, an 18-year-old stepson, and what I see, they are bombarded everywhere they look with hypersexualized stuff. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And as a parent, you can't stop them seeing it. It's literally everywhere. So you've got to sort of tell them, you've got to be open and honest about it with them. Like, this isn't right. And I don't care about a person's sexuality or anything like that, but the whole LGBT movement is a Marxist movement. Outright, it's designed to awaken something in children that they don't need to be awakened to, and it's all in the name of peace and love and inclusion, and this is why I tell people that left-wing politics, I don't have any problem with right or left. I like to look at the best bits of both, but then you get the left-wing politics is the vehicle of choice in our generation of this extremist agenda, and it's blatant. But so many people think, you just got to be accepting of everyone, which you do. They're absolutely right. However, they piggyback on that this hypersexualized culture, and there is a real culture war going on right now. I mean, it's rife over here in the UK, and from what I see, it is in the US as well. And what Mr. T, who I'm referring to, did was stepped into that system and smashed the mind control of political correctness. He just came in and he just blurted anything out that he wanted to say, and it was done on purpose. He just smashed it all up, and I think he's given you guys a lifeline. I really do, and I don't think it's over by any stretch. But without ruining the channel, do you see that was a move of patriots who can see what's going on? Sort of the President 45.
Yeah, he was a wrecking ball to that the agendas of the global elite, and I applauded that at the time, and I still do. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more people awake now, And, we may not be able to prevent all of these agendas from moving forward, but we can constantly put wrenches in the system so we can try to slow that encroachment down, and it's not just communism. So what they have in China now, it's this fascist communist combination. And what it looks like to me that is going to be tried to happen here for the global government, it's going to be this weird chimera of communism, fascism, and predatory monopolistic capitalism.
Right. I can see that, yeah.
That's what it looks like. And so that's not very good.
I think it's really important that we have this conversation, that people are aware, because what I find with what a lot of people do is they it's not nice, it's not comfortable,
No.
but we need to be aware, particularly as parents as well. We need to be aware. We really do. And they're not even hiding the agenda anymore. It is so blatant.
We just had a back to school drag show in one of the most conservative cities in the whole country, Provo, Utah, last week. Back to school drag show, all ages, welcome. And they did a drag show, and this is actually funded by big corporations. It's not happening organically. They did a drag show in my small town in southern Utah in a park that is right across from the Children's Museum. They did a drag show there, and just last month, 2 months ago, maybe now. But they're going around, and again, I don't have any animus against people who are gay or trans, and everyone has a place at the table in society. But yeah, it's the agenda to radicalize into. It's not, sorry, like, you don't get to teach my child about that. Sorry.
Well, it's inappropriate, yeah.
My thing is too, like, even Jason Aldean's wife just came out, Brittany, on Tucker and or Instagram and what have you, and she made a really good point. She basically was like, children, like, everything has like an age appropriate thing, whether it's a PG-13 versus rated R or X, cigarettes, alcohol, certain medications, driver's license, voting, joining the military, all these things have age appropriate things. So why isn't there age appropriate on some of the content that's going out on TikTok or what have you? Why is there not anything about, age appropriate stuff for certain surgeries, that we're finding a lot of people who've had these surgeries then come back and change their mind because they were just convinced, or it was hypey or trendy, or, and once how the algorithms work, once you click a certain thing, you're going to get, or the kids, whoever, are going to get like 29 other things in the feed according to whatever that thing is. So they're bombarded with that over and over until they could be brainwashed or convinced that something's going on, and they do something so drastic because their teachers or whoever is encouraging it, or in some cases parents, in all these like subtle things with, and in your face things with movies and music and celebrities and blah, blah, blah. So they're finding that people want it to be undone after they're grown and realize what they've done and want to get it done. But Jason Aldean's wife, she comes out and says all this stuff. Next thing you know, his PR company, who's been with him, I think it was 10 or 20 years, they cancel him. So like, if you talk about it and you go against whatever, even if you're not really, quote, against the situation, like, I'm obviously for whatever anyone wants to do. I just don't think it should be talked about to a 10-year-old or a 9-year-old or a 14-year-old in the middle of like that age is such a.
And without parental permission.
Right.
If parents want to talk to their kids about that, that's their choice. But see, no one wants someone to go into in kindergarten and teach Bible classes at a public school, because that's a specific ideology. And this gender and queer theory are Marxist critical theories, just like critical race theory. And they are an ideology. And they don't get to teach this to our kids, but they do. And they do through the social and emotional learning. There's a whole issue with something that I worked with a group of parents locally to get pornographic books removed from the public school libraries. And I'm not talking like books with like a little innuendo. I'm talking like full on pornographic content, like shockingly so. And strangely enough, throughout my state of Utah, there are many school districts that will not remove those books. The ACLU comes after and has lawsuits, and they go after the school board members. And there's people that are in the schools and in the school districts that are either communist sympathizers or they're just duped. They're just stupid. They're just duped.
I have to agree. Yeah, because like I said before, I have no problem with left-wing politics. I think it's got some really good points to it, but it's the extreme that they push it to, and over here we've just had in my hometown. I live on the northwest coast, a little town called Blackpool. I don't know if you've heard of it. On the coast, and it was a very, very liberal town. It has a big gay community. It's got something called the Pink Pound here. It brings a lot of money into the town and stuff. And I've got a lot of gay friends, and fine, they're brilliant people. But they recently had this whole dragged story time for kids in the local library. It's never happened over here because in the UK we're generally quite conservative as a nation, and a couple of grandparents stormed it and started like throwing stuff around and protested it and everything. So what happens? They spin it so that they're victims, and it's like, oh, that we're still victimized and all this sort of stuff. And it's like this cultural that we have to be smart about how we deal with this. We must never ever get out of a place of love for these people, because we do love them. But we will not tolerate you doing this to our children. That's the bottom line, and there is a way to go about it. And smashing stuff up and fighting is exactly what they want, because civil unrest will bring in a world order. They want us to fight each other. That's why they want race wars. They want LGBT wars. They want, Christianity and Islam fighting. They want everything to keep us. If we're fighting each other, then they can bring order from the chaos, which is the mantra of many secret societies: order out of chaos. Absolutely. It's there when you know, and I find it interesting is you've done the work and you've seen how this happened in Russia. How long ago was it in Russia that this happened, by the way?
So 1917. We have the Bolshevik Revolution and the Russian Revolution. So the big difference between communism being implemented in Russia and the Soviet Union, and where they're trying to infiltrate, have infiltrated Western society, is that Russia was fresh, like they were barely industrialized. The peasantry had just been liberated from serfdom like 30 years before. 40, like a few decades before. They were mostly illiterate. They did not have widespread schooling. And so the communists were able to get in right then when all that stuff was forming and just take hold of it from the get-go. Whereas it's been more of a chore in Western culture because there's been institutions that formed previously that had quite a big hold on society that they had to all be infiltrated.
Yeah. No. Well, if you think about it, what would be ideal would be if there was a massive global situation that locked everything down, and that would instill massive rules on everyone, and that would crush the economy, Western economy, and crush Western civilization. That would be ideal. That'd serve some sort of reset that they would want, wouldn't it? Well,
yeah, I'm happy you brought that up. I want to talk now really quick about Yuri Bezmenov. He was a KGB agent who defected to the West in the late 70s, and he laid out the 4 steps of communist subversion of a society. And you have a pretty good handle on it. Step 1, demoralization. This takes between 15 to 20 years for communists to go in and take over the education of the rising generation and train them up to see communism as a good thing and socialism as a good thing. And in 1985, when this KGB agent who defected had been interviewed, he said we were already way overfulfilled. America was way overfulfilled at that point with demoralization. It already had been going on for a few generations. Step 2 is what you just mentioned, and that is destabilization. It takes between 2 to 5 years to destabilize a society, to destabilize the medical industry, the economy, the international relations, the energy production, all these different facets of society. For America and Western countries, this is a big nut to crack, this destabilization. we're already well underway since March 2020. I think it's pretty obvious.
2.5 years into it already, definitely. Yeah.
And then step 3 is crisis, and this is a hostile takeover of the government. And step 4 is called normalization, and that's basically just the ongoing implementation of communism. And I had those are his 4 steps. We're like, we can have crisis at any time, but then actually, as I was thinking about it over these last few months, perhaps we already have had a hostile takeover of our government. Mm-hmm. And now perhaps we're having all 4 of these steps going on at the same time. They're continuing with the demoralization. They're hammering through all the destabilization. They already did a hostile takeover to a large degree of the government in America and perhaps lots of other places. And they're trying to normalize all of this and get people thinking that this is the right way to go. I think it's all happening at once. Not a very safe situation to be in.
I mean, sorry, Sharnael, I keep talking here, but it's a topic really sort of, the whole culture war and what's going on. When you can see it, it's like, how do you wake people up to this? So I'm really thrilled we're having this conversation. This is where, and you can see why they crush religious thought and idea, because they don't want you to connect with anything bigger than them.
Yeah.
And go on, sorry.
Well, getting to the second step that communists take to try to destroy religion or control religion is heavy persecution of the religious fringes. That definitely has been happening in America. The 2 main examples that I explore in my book are the Branch Davidians of Waco, Texas, that whole thing. And then the FLDS, Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, having their ranch raided and all the kids forcibly taken and put in foster care. That was in 2008. And Branch Davidians that whole thing was in 1993. Those are the 2 most blatant examples. Again, not very popular groups, highly demonized in the press, one-sided material. There's probably some problems with both of those groups, but the due process would have been the proper way to handle the issues, not militarized raids. And in the example of the Branch Davidians, the forensic evidence shows that our government gunned them down when they were trying to escape their burning compound.
Wow.
So,
this is the time. I mean, if you pray, now's the time to pray, and not be in fear, because I truly believe in humanity. I believe that we've got this. I think that this is why we are here for this time. The powers that be, the real powers that be, saw, and I believe we've been sent to deal with this crap.
Absolutely. But the third step is infiltration of the churches, and this was funded beginning over 100 years ago by the Gilded Age robber barons to send literal Marxist communists into the seminaries. By the 50s and 60s, 1950s and 1960s, roughly half of America's mainline Christian churches were already infiltrated from the top with communists, avowed communists. Some of them just right out in the open, completely open. It's all documented. And now in more recent times, it's evangelicals have been greatly targeted, and there's been major headway there. And then there's been infiltration in other ways also. But basically, if anyone who belongs to a highly centralized, large church in America, your church would be prime target for infiltration. And we should all just assume that our church is infiltrated, unless it's a teeny tiny mom and pop church with little power. So
I think people are feeling that too, and there's been such a, not just because of the C happened and where we couldn't meet together, but I think just in general, the programming, people are kind of just over that and ready to remember going within and listening to the God within us instead of all these rules and different things that, I obviously believe in God. I know everybody here does, and maybe some of you watching don't, and that's fine too. I'm cool with everybody wherever you're at. But I think there was a mass exodus and an opportunity for people to really awaken with what's happened. And this is kind of backfired in some ways with what they meant to do is actually, when people were home during that time, this just giving them time to research and look up things. And instead of just vegging out on Netflix for 3 years, they were looking at documentaries and researching some things and kind of seeing where some things weren't lining up, and causing them to dig deeper and to look at some things. And so I'm with you, Craig. I believe in humanity, and I believe that when you overplay your hand, which they have, some of this is just so startling, like in your face, shocking, that I think it's caused some people to go like, wait a minute. And there's been some shifts in consciousness and some ideas and programming, and people have kind of woke up to realize like these things aren't making sense. You know, when it's so in your face, it's like the whole thing about the frog jumping in the boiling water. I think there's been a boiling water situation where people are like, whoa, that's too hot. I'm out of here. Let me look more into what I've thought I believed and unravel the cord here. And I think at first when people have that moment, there's a little bit of depression, a little bit of untrust of like, who's who in the zoo? Who do I believe? You know, what have I believed?
Dark night of the soul, definitely.
Yeah. Why have I believed this? Let's go back and find the roots of things. And, confusion is, definitely a big part of, the wake up process of just trying to figure things out and sort through what's real, what isn't, who am I, where do I go now? But I know you got to jump off, and I just wanted to end with, an encouraging part of, this is our time. This is the time to really tap into your divinity, to really tap into who we are, and who God is in us, and to be the biggest form of expression of that, and to, manage and get through some things, no matter what we need to do, is just set ourselves up for the highest and best in this situation. And, reading your book, I think would give some people some keys to kind of navigate and learn, like, okay, you know what, this is some things to look for, just give some little signposts here and there of like, oh, you know what, I read about that, I saw that, and this is not a good direction. Maybe I'm going to go the opposite direction. So how can people find your book? How can people find you? Like, what would be a way that you can just let people know how to find you before we end today?
Yeah, my book is available from my website, beneathsheepsclothing.com, and also on Amazon. It's available as hard copy, paperback, and got some pictures in here also, and also as an ebook. And I'm also working with a documentary filmmaker to make a documentary. And the last chapter of my book is about solutions. And the last part of this documentary will be about solutions, because we have such an opportunity to rise up, just like you were saying. Yeah. And that's why we're here. That's why we decided to come to Earth at this time and to face this and to prevail. So just please, if anyone wants to email me, you can also email me at beneathsheepsclothing@gmail.com. If you have any questions, if you know anyone who might want to fund a documentary, have the documentary filmmaker, but not the funding yet, grab my book and share this interview.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Any final words, Craig, before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I could talk about this for hours. I think it's a really, really important topic. And it's important that everyone is aware of the tactics used on us. They use our compassion against us.
Yes.
Highly high level witchcraft type manipulation. Again, maybe we'll have to do a part 2 someday to really delve into the tactics that they use. I'd love to hear what you've got to say. But yeah, thank you so much for doing the work, and I hope to see you again.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. And definitely, check out all the websites. I'm going to put clickable links to everybody here, so you guys can find Craig's crystal shop and his music, and find Julie's book and be able to find her. And you guys can go to swiftfire.org and find our resources, our teaching, our bioscans, soul audits, all the stuff for the next show. If you guys do your due diligence and share this, and also please hit that subscribe button so you can get notifications of all the different amazing people that we're bringing to light and to interview, so you can have all the big picture in what you're doing, and people can you guys can understand and grow as we grow. So Love you guys so much. Definitely share this, and I hope you guys have a fantastic week. We'll see you next Thursday at noon. We'll be here, so be there, be square. Talk to you soon. All right, bye.
Right.
Hi, my name is Dr. Sharnael Wolverton Sehan. I am so excited to introduce to you my 80 card deck of crystals, oils, and decrees. Yes, all these things are frequency. And guess what? You and I are frequency. And when we apply modalities of high frequency, we actually change our frequency. So check out these cards, have frequency in your home, and bring your upgrade today.